The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, and 300 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My wife, Clara, stood frozen at the auction podium, her perfect smile cracking like ice under pressure. The billionaire Richard Vale had just bid $50,000 for a private evening with her, and she had accepted with a giggle that made my stomach turn. "Well," I muttered, pulling out my phone. "This should be interesting." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I was the +1 to my own marriage, standing in the shadows, while Clara basked in the spotlight of Manhattan's most exclusive charity gala. The Metropolitan Arts Foundation's annual fundraiser drew every power player in the city, and my wife had spent months preparing for this night. Her silver dress caught the light from a dozen crystal chandeliers as she worked the crowd like a seasoned politician. I had watched her transform over the past 5 years, from the ambitious marketing director I married into something else entirely. Someone who measured her worth in Instagram followers and society page mentions. Someone who introduced me as my husband, with the same enthusiasm she might reserve for discussing her accountant. But tonight was different. Tonight, she had crossed a line. Vale stepped forward, his predatory grin visible even from my position near the bar. At 52, he commanded respect through fear and money in equal measure. His tech empire had made him one of the youngest billionaires in the country, and his reputation with women was legendary for all the wrong reasons. "Ladies and gentlemen," Clara announced, her voice carrying across the ballroom, "it seems we have a very generous bidder for our special auction item." The crowd murmured with excitement. They thought this was entertainment. I knew better. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Margaret Chen, chairwoman of Vale's board of directors. She had been fighting a quiet war against his excesses for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Margaret," I said quietly into the phone, "it's David Mitchell. Are you watching the live stream of the charity auction?" "David? What are you doing calling me at this hour?" "Trust me, you'll want to see this. Vale just publicly bid on a private evening with my wife, in front of cameras, at a charity event." The silence stretched for several seconds. "Are you recording this?" "The entire event is being live-streamed. Check the Foundation's website." I ended the call and watched Clara accept Vale's hand as he joined her on the small stage. The auctioneer, clearly uncomfortable with the direction things had taken, tried to move the evening along, but Vale wasn't finished. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, taking the microphone from Clara, "I think we should make this official. A receipt, perhaps?" The crowd laughed nervously. I felt something cold settle in my chest, replacing the humiliation with something far more dangerous. Clara giggled again, that same sound that had once charmed me during our college years. Now it felt like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh, Richard, you're terrible." "Terrible enough to write a check for $50,000, he replied, pulling out his phone. "My assistant can transfer the funds right now. Consider it a down payment." The ballroom erupted in uncomfortable laughter. I watched my wife of 8 years accept the arm of a man who had just essentially purchased her company for the evening, and I made a decision that would change everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow morning. This ends now." But I wasn't going to wait for tomorrow. I walked through the crowd, nodding to acquaintances who had watched the entire spectacle unfold. Their expressions ranged from amusement to disgust, but none of them seemed surprised. That told me everything I needed to know about how they viewed my marriage. "Excuse me," I said, approaching the stage. "Could I have a word with my wife?" Vale turned toward me, his expression shifting from amusement to annoyance. "I believe she's occupied for the evening." "Actually," I replied, pulling out my phone and showing him the screen, "I think she's about to become very unoccupied." Clara leaned forward to look at my phone, and her face went pale. The screen showed a news alert from the business section. Tech billionaire Richard Vail under investigation for workplace harassment. That's impossible, Vail said, but his voice had lost its confident edge. That story doesn't exist. It will in about 30 minutes, I said. Margaret Chen is very efficient when she wants to be. The crowd had begun to notice our conversation, and several people were holding up their phones to record. Clara grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my jacket. David, what did you do? What I should have done years ago, I replied. I stopped being the invisible man in my own life. Vail stepped closer, and I could smell the expensive whiskey on his breath. You have no idea who you're dealing with. A man who just publicly solicited my wife at a charity event, I said loudly enough for the nearby guests to hear. In front of cameras, with witnesses, while under investigation by his own board of directors. The ballroom had gone quiet except for the soft clicking of camera phones. Clara's perfect evening was dissolving into a public relations nightmare, and I found myself enjoying every second of it. The car is waiting outside, I told Clara, unless you'd prefer to leave with your new business partner. She looked between Vail and me, her carefully applied makeup beginning to show stress cracks around her eyes. The woman who had spent months planning this evening, who had bought a dress that cost more than most people's rent, was finally realizing that her social climbing had consequences. I'll call you tomorrow, she whispered to Vail. No, I said firmly. You won't. I took her arm and guided her toward the exit, leaving Vail standing alone on the stage with 300 people staring at him. As we reached the door, I heard the auctioneer desperately trying to redirect attention to the next item up for bid. The ride home was silent except for the sound of Clara's phone buzzing with notifications, text messages, missed calls, social media alerts. Her carefully curated world was already beginning to crumble, and we both knew it. You humiliated me, she finally said as we pulled into our building's parking garage. I humiliated you? I laughed, and the sound surprised me with its bitterness. Clara, you just accepted money from a man for your company, at a charity event, in front of everyone we know. It was a joke, a publicity stunt. Was it? Because from where I stood, it looked like a transaction. She turned to face me, her eyes flashing with anger. You're jealous. You've always been jealous of my success, of the attention I get. Success? I shook my head. Clara, you just sold yourself to the highest bidder. If that's your definition of success, then we have bigger problems than I thought. We rode the elevator to our apartment in silence. The penthouse had been Clara's idea, a symbol of our rising status in the city. Now it felt like a museum, beautiful and cold and empty of anything resembling warmth. Clara disappeared into the bedroom, probably to call her best friend Tessa and begin damage control. I poured myself a drink and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. My phone rang. Margaret Chen. David, I owe you a debt of gratitude. The board has been looking for grounds to remove Vail for months. Tonight's performance was exactly what we needed. What happens now? Emergency meeting tomorrow at 9. Vail will be suspended pending a full investigation. The optics alone are enough to justify action. I hung up and allowed myself a small smile. Phase 1 was complete, but as I stood there in my expensive apartment, looking out at a city that suddenly felt full of possibilities, I realized that I was just getting started. Clara emerged from the bedroom an hour later, her phone pressed to her ear. She was talking to Tessa Lynn, her best friend and lawyer, the woman who had encouraged every bad decision Clara had made over the past 2 years. I don't care what it costs, Clara was saying. Fix this. Make it go away. I listened to her conversation from the kitchen, marveling at how quickly she had shifted from victim to strategist. She wasn't sorry about what had happened. She was sorry she had been caught. David embarrassed me on purpose, she continued. He's been sabotaging my career for years. Maybe we should look into our options. Our options. I wondered if she realized I could hear every word. Yes, I know about the prenup. But there are ways around these things, aren't there? I set down my glass and walked back to the living room. Clara ended her call quickly when she saw me. Calling in reinforcements? I asked. Tessa thinks we should consider couples counseling. Tessa thinks we should consider divorce lawyers, I corrected. I heard the conversation, Clara. She had the grace to look embarrassed, but only for a moment. You've been different lately. Distant. Angry. I've been watching my wife turn into someone I don't recognize, someone who accepts money from strange men and calls it charity work. Richard isn't a strange man. He's a business contact. He's a predator with a checkbook, and you know it. Clara walked to the bar and poured herself a glass of wine. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice remained steady. You don't understand the world I work in. Sometimes you have to make compromises. Compromises, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it? My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Saw the news about tonight. Impressive work. Call me if you want to discuss next steps. A friend. I showed the message to Clara, and her face went pale. Who is that? Someone who appreciates good strategy, I said. Don't worry. I'm sure Tessa will figure out how to handle it. But even as I said the words, I was already planning my next move. Clara had spent years building her reputation in this city, cultivating relationships and climbing social ladders. She had forgotten that I understood this world too. I had just chosen to stay in the background. That was about to change. The next morning, I woke up to find Clara already gone. A note on the kitchen counter explained that she had an early meeting with her PR team to discuss crisis management. I smiled as I read it. She still thought this was something that could be managed. I made coffee and opened my laptop to check the news. The story had already spread beyond the business pages. Billionaire's charity auction scandal was trending on social media, complete with video clips from the evening. Clara's name was mentioned in every article. My phone rang, the unknown number from the night before. David Mitchell? Speaking. My name is James Patterson. I'm a private investigator. I think we should meet. I'm not sure what you think I need investigated. Not what you need investigated. What I've already investigated. About your wife. About Richard Vale. About a certain lawyer named Tessa Lynn. I felt my pulse quicken. What kind of information? The kind that makes last night look like amateur hour. Can you meet me for coffee in an hour? I agreed to meet him at a small cafe in Midtown, away from the usual haunts where Clara and her friends might spot us. As I got dressed, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. For the first time in years, I looked awake, alert, dangerous. The cafe was crowded with the usual mix of tourists and office workers grabbing their morning caffeine. Patterson was easy to spot. A man in his 50s with the kind of weathered face that suggested he had seen everything the city had to offer. You're probably wondering how I know about your situation, he said without preamble. The thought had crossed my mind. He slid a manila folder across the table. I've been investigating Richard Vale for 6 months on behalf of several women who worked for his company. What I found was interesting, but not quite enough for a lawsuit. I opened the folder and felt my stomach drop. Photos of Clara and Vale at restaurants, hotels, private clubs, dates going back 4 months. Your wife has been very discreet, Patterson continued, but not discreet enough. I studied the photos, trying to process what I was seeing. Clara laughing at something Vale had said, Clara getting into his car, Clara leaving a hotel at 2 p.m. Why are you showing me this? Because last night, you handed me the missing piece of my investigation. Vale's public behavior at the auction, combined with evidence of an ongoing affair with a married woman, gives my clients the ammunition they need. I close the folder, my mind racing. What do you want from me? Your cooperation, and maybe your help in getting more evidence. What kind of evidence? Patterson leaned forward. The kind that proves this affair wasn't just personal. Vale has been using his relationship with your wife to influence her PR firm's other clients. Insider trading, market manipulation, the kind of crimes that carry serious prison time. I thought about Clara's sudden success over the past year, the high-profile clients she had attracted, the expensive lifestyle we had been living. How long have you known about this? 3 weeks. I was planning to approach you after I had more evidence, but last night accelerated my timeline. I picked up the folder again, studying the photos more carefully. In one of them, Clara was handing Vale a document. In another, they were having what looked like an intense conversation over dinner. What do you need me to do? Keep doing exactly what you did last night. Push them. Make them nervous. Nervous people make mistakes. I left the cafe with Patterson's business card and a new understanding of just how deep my wife's betrayal went. The affair was bad enough, but the criminal activity made it something else entirely. As I walked back to my apartment, I called in sick to work. I had more important things to do today. Clara was in the living room when I returned, pacing back and forth while talking on her phone. She looked up when I entered, and I could see the stress etched in every line of her face. I have to go, she said into the phone. David just got home. She hung up and turned to face me. We need to talk. I agree. Last night was a mistake. I see that now. Richard can be intense. I should have handled the situation differently. You should have handled it by walking away. It's not that simple, David. My career, our lifestyle, it all depends on maintaining certain relationships. I sat down on the couch and looked at her, really looked at her. When had she become this person? When had ambition replaced integrity? What relationships, Clara? What exactly have you been doing to maintain our lifestyle? Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe? Or calculation? I don't know what you're implying. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo from Patterson's folder. Clara and Vale having dinner at an exclusive restaurant downtown. Where did you get that? Does it matter? The question is, what else don't I know about? Clara sat down across from me, her hands folded in her lap. For a moment, she looked like the woman I had married. Vulnerable. Human. It started as business, she said quietly. Richard needed PR help, and I needed a high-profile client. But he's persuasive. Persuasive enough to get you into bed? She flinched. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Clara was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. He offered me things, opportunities, connections, a chance to build something bigger than just another PR firm. And all it cost was your marriage. Our marriage was already over, David. We both know that. We've been going through the motions for months. I stood up and walked to the window. She wasn't wrong about our marriage, but that didn't make her betrayal any easier to accept. So, what happens now? Tessa thinks we should separate quietly, avoid any more public drama. Tessa thinks a lot of things, I said. Does she also think you should continue your business relationship with Richard? That's between Richard and me. I turned back to face her. Actually, it's between Richard and the FBI. Clara's face went white. What are you talking about? Insider trading, Clara. Market manipulation. Using your PR firm to influence stock prices based on information Richard gave you. Did you really think no one would notice? You're bluffing. I pulled out Patterson's business card and tossed it on the coffee table. James Patterson, private investigator. He's been watching you for months. Clara picked up the card with shaking hands. This is impossible. Is it? Think about it, Clara. All those successful campaigns for Richard's competitors. All those perfectly timed press releases that moved stock prices. All those insider tips that made your other clients very wealthy. She stood up abruptly and walked to the bar. Her hands were shaking as she poured herself a drink, even though it was barely noon. What do you want? I want the truth. All of it. Clara took a long sip of her drink before answering. Richard has been sharing information with me about his competitors, about market trends, about upcoming announcements. I use that information to help my other clients. In exchange for what? Access, introductions, and yes, sometimes more personal arrangements. I felt something break inside my chest, not my heart, that had broken months ago when I realized our marriage was over. This was something else, my last connection to the woman I had once loved. How long? 6 months, maybe longer. And Tessa knew about this? Clara hesitated. Tessa helped arrange some of the meetings. I picked up my phone and dialed Patterson's number. It's David Mitchell. I'm ready to cooperate fully. Clara lunged for the phone, but I stepped away from her. Yes, she's admitted to everything, insider trading, market manipulation, the affair, all of it. David, please, Clara begged. You don't understand what you're doing. I hung up and looked at my wife. Really looked at her. The woman who had shared my bed for 8 years, who had built a life with me, who had thrown it all away for money and status. I understand perfectly, I said. I'm ending this before it gets worse. Clara collapsed onto the couch, her drink spilling onto her expensive dress. They'll destroy me. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. My phone buzzed with a text from Patterson. FBI contact established. They're very interested. Expect a call within the hour. I showed the message to Clara, and she started to cry. Not the elegant tears of a woman trying to manipulate a situation, but the raw, desperate sobs of someone who had finally realized the consequences of her actions. Please, David, we can work this out. I'll end things with Richard. I'll close the PR firm. We can start over. Start over? I laughed, and the sound was harsh even to my own ears. Clara, you committed federal crimes. There is no starting over. The phone rang. FBI, I answered on the second ring. David Mitchell speaking. Mr. Mitchell, this is Agent Sarah Williams with the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. I understand you have information about potential securities violations involving Richard Vale and your wife. I looked at Clara, who was staring at me with a mixture of terror and hatred. Yes, Agent Williams, I have quite a bit of information. We'd like to meet with you this afternoon, if possible. I'll be there. I hung up and turned back to Clara. She had stopped crying and was now looking at me with an expression I had never seen before. Cold calculation mixed with desperate fury. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. I regret a lot of things, Clara, but ending this isn't one of them. She stood up and walked toward the bedroom. I need to make some calls. Clara, I called after her. Don't do anything stupid, it's already over. She paused in the doorway. No, David, it's just beginning. I spent the afternoon at FBI headquarters, providing Agent Williams with everything I knew about Clara's activities. The photos from Patterson, the timeline of her relationship with Vale, the details of her PR campaigns that had moved stock prices. This is excellent work, Mr. Mitchell. We've been investigating Mr. Vale for months, but we couldn't establish a clear connection between his inside information and market manipulation. What happens now? We'll need to interview your wife and Mr. Vale. Depending on what we find, we'll likely file charges within the week. I drove home through evening traffic, thinking about the conversation I would need to have with Clara. The apartment was dark when I arrived, and for a moment I thought she might have left, but her car was still in the garage. I found her in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with her phone in her hands. How did it go? She asked without looking up. About as well as you'd expect. They're going to arrest me. Probably. Clara finally looked at me, and I was surprised to see that she had stopped crying. Her expression was calm, almost serene. Tessa has a plan. Tessa's plans got you into this mess. Tessa's plan will get me out of it. I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of plan? Clara smiled, and for the first time in months, it looked genuine. The kind that makes you the villain instead of me. Before I could ask what she meant, my phone rang. Unknown number. David Mitchell? Yes. This is Detective Ray Morrison with the NYPD. We need to speak with you about some allegations that have been made against you. I looked at Clara, who was still smiling. What kind of allegations? Domestic abuse, Mr. Mitchell. We're going to need you to come down to the station. I hung up the phone and stared at my wife. You called the police? I called my lawyer. Tessa called the police. Clara, there's no evidence of domestic abuse because there hasn't been any domestic abuse. Isn't there? She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of herself with a bruised face. This is what I looked like after you found out about Richard. The photo was obviously fake, but it was professionally done. Someone with serious resources had created it. No one will believe this. Won't they? A controlling husband who becomes violent when he discovers his wife's affair? It's a very believable story, David. I realized that I had seriously underestimated both Clara and Tessa. While I had been playing chess, they had been playing a completely different game. This won't work, Clara. The FBI has evidence of your crimes. Evidence provided by an abusive husband trying to destroy his wife's career. Evidence that might not be admissible if it was obtained through coercion and threats. My phone rang again. Agent Williams. Mr. Mitchell, we've run into a complication. Your wife's attorney has filed a restraining order against you, claiming domestic abuse. This changes the nature of our investigation. Agent Williams, my wife is lying. That's for the courts to determine. In the meantime, we need to suspend our cooperation until this matter is resolved. I hung up and looked at Clara, who was now standing by the window with her arms crossed. Tessa is very good at her job, she said. This is temporary, Clara. The truth will come out. Will it? Or will you be too busy defending yourself against criminal charges to worry about my business dealings? I realized that I was in serious trouble. While I had been focused on exposing Clara's crimes, she and Tessa had been building a case against me. A case that could destroy my reputation and my freedom. But as I stood there in my expensive apartment, looking at the woman who had just declared war on me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I was finally awake. You know what, Clara? You're right. This is just the beginning. I walked past her toward the door, grabbing my jacket from the chair. Where are you going? To hire a lawyer, a better lawyer than Tessa. David, wait. I turned back to look at her one last time. She was beautiful, successful, and completely without conscience. I wondered how I had missed that last part for so long. You made one mistake, Clara. What's that? You assumed I would play defense. I left the apartment and took the elevator down to the parking garage. As I walked toward my car, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had memorized years ago but never used. Catherine Morrison, attorney at law. Catherine, it's David Mitchell. I need your help. Catherine Morrison was the best criminal defense attorney in the city, and she had been trying to get me to leave my corporate job and work for her firm for 3 years. David? What's wrong? My wife just accused me of domestic abuse to cover up her own federal crimes. How quickly can you meet? I'm in my office now. Come over. I drove through the city streets, thinking about everything that had happened over the past 24 hours. Clara had outmaneuvered me, but she had also revealed her true nature. Now I knew exactly who I was fighting. Catherine's office was in a sleek building in Lower Manhattan, all glass and steel and expensive furniture. She was waiting for me in her conference room with a pot of coffee and a legal pad covered in notes. Tell me everything, she said. I spent the next 2 hours explaining the situation, from the charity auction to Clara's affair to the FBI investigation to the fake domestic abuse allegations. Catherine listened without interruption, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. "This is complicated," she said when I finished, "but not impossible." "What do you think?" "I think your wife and her lawyer are playing a dangerous game. Fake domestic abuse allegations, obstruction of a federal investigation, witness intimidation. They're committing new crimes to cover up old ones." "Can you prove it?" Catherine smiled. "David, I've been waiting 3 years for you to walk into my office with a case this interesting. Trust me, I can prove it." We spent another hour developing a strategy. Catherine would handle the domestic abuse allegations while working with the FBI to expose Clara's obstruction of justice. Meanwhile, I would gather more evidence of Clara's criminal activities. "One more thing," Catherine said as I prepared to leave. "Where are you staying tonight? You can't go back to your apartment with the restraining order in place." I hadn't thought about that. "Hotel, I guess." "Stay at my guest house. It's secure, and you'll need a safe place to work." I agreed and followed Catherine to her home in Brooklyn Heights. The guest house was small but comfortable, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could think clearly. As I settled in for the night, I realized that Clara had done me a favor. By escalating the situation, she had forced me to stop playing defense and start playing offense. And unlike my wife, I had no intention of committing crimes to win this war. I just had to be smarter than she was. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Clara and a text message that simply said, "We need to talk." I ignored them all and drove to Catherine's office where she was waiting with news. "The FBI wants to meet with us this afternoon," she said. "Agent Williams is very interested in your wife's obstruction of justice." "What about the domestic abuse allegations?" "The detective assigned to the case is Ray Morrison. He's Catherine Morrison's brother, and he's not impressed with the evidence your wife provided." I felt a glimmer of hope. "So the fake photo won't hold up?" "The photo is good, but not perfect. Ray found several inconsistencies that suggest digital manipulation. More importantly, your wife made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" Catherine pulled out a file and showed me a police report. "She claimed you hit her last Tuesday night. But last Tuesday night, you were at a corporate retreat in Philadelphia, with 40 witnesses and hotel security footage." I remembered the retreat. 2 days of mind-numbing team-building exercises and strategic planning sessions. At the time, it had felt like torture. Now, it felt like salvation. "So the charges will be dropped?" "The charges were never filed. Ray told Tessa that they needed more evidence before proceeding. He was buying us time." We spent the morning preparing for the FBI meeting, going over every detail of Clara's activities. Catherine had done her homework, uncovering financial records and communication logs that painted a clear picture of the insider trading scheme. "Your wife made a lot of money over the past 6 months, Catherine said. "More than her PR firm should have been able to generate legitimately." "How much?" "Nearly $2 million in fees and bonuses, all tied to clients who benefited from Richard Vale's inside information." I thought about our lifestyle over the past year. The expensive apartment, the luxury vacations, the designer clothes. I had assumed Clara's business was simply doing well. I had never questioned where the money was coming from. "What happens when the FBI arrests her?" "That depends on whether she cooperates. If she provides evidence against Vale and agrees to testify, she might get a reduced sentence. If she fights it, she'll fight it. Clara doesn't admit defeat. Then she's looking at serious prison time." We met with Agent Williams at 2 o'clock. She had brought another agent and a federal prosecutor, which suggested they were taking the case seriously. "Mr. Mitchell, we appreciate your cooperation," Agent Williams said. "The evidence you've provided has been very helpful." "What's the next step?" "We're preparing arrest warrants for your wife and Mr. Vale. We expect to execute them within 48 hours. The prosecutor, A serious woman named Janet Torres leaned forward. We're also investigating the obstruction of justice charges related to the fake domestic abuse allegations. What kind of penalties are we talking about? I asked. For the securities violations, 5 to 10 years. For the obstruction charges, another 2 to 5 years. Your wife is looking at significant prison time. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Clara had brought this on herself, but that didn't make it easier to watch her destroy her life. There's one more thing, Agent Williams said. We'd like you to wear a wire. A wire? We believe your wife will try to contact you before the arrests. If she admits to the crimes or tries to intimidate you, we'd like to have it on record. I looked at Catherine, who nodded. It's a good idea, David. It will strengthen the case and protect you from future retaliation. I agreed to wear the wire, and the FBI technicians fitted me with a small recording device that was virtually undetectable. As I left the federal building, I felt like I was preparing for battle. My phone rang as I reached my car. Clara. David, please, we need to talk. I thought you had a restraining order against me. I can have Tessa withdraw it. Just meet me for coffee. One conversation. I looked back at the federal building, thinking about the recording device hidden in my jacket. Where? The cafe on Fifth Avenue, the one where we had our first date. It was a manipulative choice, designed to make me nostalgic for better times, but it was also a public place with security cameras, which would protect both of us. I'll be there in an hour. The cafe looked exactly the same as it had 10 years ago, when Clara and I were young professionals trying to make our mark on the city. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her expensive clothes looked like she had slept in them. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. What do you want, Clara? I want to fix this. All of it. The affair, the business problems, the legal issues, I want to make it right. It's too late for that. Is it? What if I told you I could make Richard disappear from our lives forever? What if I could undo everything that happened? I thought about the recording device and chose my words carefully. How would you do that? Clara leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Richard has been using me, David. Using my firm to manipulate stock prices, to hurt his competitors, to make himself richer. I have evidence of everything. What kind of evidence? Recordings, documents, proof that he forced me to participate in illegal activities. I stared at her, realizing that she was trying to flip the script again, make herself the victim instead of the perpetrator. Forced you how? Blackmail, threats. He said he would destroy my career if I didn't cooperate. Clara, you told me yesterday that you entered into this relationship willingly. I lied. I was scared. Richard is a dangerous man, David. He's capable of anything. I thought about the photos Patterson had shown me, the evidence of Clara's willing participation in the affair and the crimes. She wasn't a victim. She was a co-conspirator trying to save herself. What do you want from me? Help me bring him down. We can work together like we used to. We can expose him and save our marriage. Our marriage is over, Clara. It doesn't have to be. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can start over. I looked at the woman I had once loved, the woman who was now trying to manipulate me one last time, and I felt nothing but pity. You're right about one thing, I said. Richard is dangerous, but so are you. Clara's expression changed, the fake vulnerability replaced by cold calculation. You're making a mistake, David. Am I? You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you're up against. Richard has resources you can't imagine, connections, power. He will destroy you. Is that a threat? It's a warning. From someone who still cares about you. I stood up to leave. Goodbye, Clara. David, wait. She grabbed my arm. There's something else you should know. About Tessa. I sat back down. curious, despite myself. Tessa has been planning this for months. The affair, the business deals, even the domestic abuse allegations. It was all her idea. Why would Tessa want to destroy our marriage? Clara hesitated, and I could see her calculating how much to reveal. Because she's in love with you. She has been for years. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Tessa Lynn, Clara's best friend, my occasional colleague, the woman who had been advising Clara throughout this entire mess. That's impossible. Is it? Think about it, David. Who introduced me to Richard? Who encouraged me to take him as a client? Who suggested I attend all those private meetings? I thought back over the past year, remembering Tessa's involvement in Clara's career decisions, her enthusiastic support for Clara's relationship with Vale, her quick response when Clara needed legal help. She's been manipulating both of us, Clara continued, setting up the affair, documenting everything, building a case against Richard while making sure I would be implicated too. Why? So she could swoop in and save you, be your hero, win your gratitude and maybe more. I felt the recording device against my chest and realized that this conversation was taking a turn I hadn't expected. If Clara was telling the truth about Tessa, then I was dealing with a conspiracy that went far deeper than a simple affair. Do you have proof of this? Clara pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages between her and Tessa. Messages that clearly showed Tessa encouraging Clara's relationship with Vale, providing advice on how to extract information from him, and coaching her on how to use that information for her other clients. She's been playing us against each other from the beginning, Clara said, and now she's positioned herself to pick up the pieces when we both fall. I studied the messages, trying to process what I was seeing. If Clara was right, then Tessa had orchestrated this entire situation. The affair, the crimes, the cover-up, even the fake domestic abuse allegations. Why are you telling me this now? Because I finally realized what she was doing. And because despite everything that's happened between us, I don't want to see you get played. I looked at Clara, trying to determine if this was another manipulation or a genuine warning. The woman who had betrayed me, lied to me, and tried to frame me for domestic abuse was now claiming to be protecting me. What do you want in return for this information? Nothing. I'm finished, David. The FBI is going to arrest me, I'm going to prison, and my life is over. But you still have a chance to avoid Tessa's trap. I stood up again, my mind racing with possibilities. I have to go. David. Clara's voice was soft, almost vulnerable. I'm sorry, for all of it. I know that doesn't change anything, but I needed you to know. I looked at her one last time, sitting alone in the cafe where we had started our relationship 10 years ago. Despite everything she had done, I felt a flicker of the old connection. I'm sorry too, I said. I left the cafe and walked several blocks before calling Catherine Morrison. We need to meet immediately, I said. There's been a development. What kind of development? The kind that changes everything. I met Catherine at her office an hour later and played her the recording of my conversation with Clara. She listened without interruption, taking notes and occasionally raising her eyebrows at particularly shocking revelations. This is incredible, she said when the recording ended. If your wife is telling the truth, then Tessa Lynn orchestrated this entire scheme. Do you think she's telling the truth? The text messages are compelling, and it would explain a lot of inconsistencies in the case. Catherine pulled out a file and spread several documents across the conference table. Look at the timeline. Every major decision your wife made over the past year was preceded by a meeting or conversation with Tessa Lynn. I studied the documents, seeing the pattern for the first time. Tessa hadn't just been advising Clara, she had been directing her. What's Tessa's motive? According to your wife, romantic obsession with you. But I think it's more than that. Catherine pulled out another document. Tessa Lynn has been building a practice in white-collar criminal defense. High-profile cases like this one are worth millions in publicity and future clients. So she creates the crime and then profits from defending the criminals? It's brilliant, in a completely unethical way. She orchestrates the scheme, documents everything, and then positions herself as the only lawyer who can navigate the complex case she created. I felt sick. How long has she been planning this? Based on the evidence, at least 18 months. She's been very patient. We spent the next 2 hours analyzing every aspect of Tessa's involvement in the case. The pattern was clear once we knew what to look for. Tessa had been pulling the strings from the beginning. What do we do now? We take this to the FBI. If they can prove Tessa's involvement, it changes the entire case. What about Clara? Catherine was quiet for a moment. Your wife is still guilty of securities violations, but if she was manipulated into committing those crimes, it could affect her sentence. And the domestic abuse allegations? If Tessa coached your wife to make false accusations, then Tessa is guilty of obstruction of justice and conspiracy. I thought about Tessa Lynn, the brilliant lawyer who had been Clara's closest friend for 5 years, the woman who had attended our dinner parties, who had given Clara advice about our marriage, who had always been supportive and helpful, the woman who had been planning to destroy my life. There's one problem, I said. How do we prove Tessa's involvement without Clara's testimony? We get Tessa to incriminate herself. How? Catherine smiled. The same way we got your wife to incriminate herself. We make her think she's winning. We spent the evening developing a strategy to expose Tessa's role in the conspiracy. It would be risky, but if it worked, we would have enough evidence to bring down the real mastermind behind the scheme. The next morning, I called Tessa Lynn's office and asked for a meeting. David, I'm so glad you called, she said. I've been worried about you. I need legal advice. The FBI wants to interview me again, and I'm not sure I trust Catherine Morrison. Of course. Can you come to my office this afternoon? I'd prefer somewhere more private. This is sensitive. My apartment then, 7 o'clock. I agreed and spent the rest of the day preparing for what could be the most important conversation of my life. The FBI had fitted me with a new recording device, and Catherine had coached me on what questions to ask. Tessa's apartment was in a luxury building on the Upper East Side, all marble and mahogany and expensive art. She greeted me at the door with a concerned expression and a bottle of wine. You look terrible, she said. This whole situation must be incredibly stressful. It has been. I never expected Clara to go this far. Clara has always been impulsive. I've been trying to help her, but she doesn't always listen to good advice. We sat in her living room, and Tessa poured 2 glasses of wine. I noticed that she seemed more relaxed than I had ever seen her, almost triumphant. Tell me about the FBI interview, she said. They have evidence of Clara's insider trading. They want me to testify against her. Will you? I don't know. She's still my wife. Tessa leaned forward, her expression sympathetic. David, you have to protect yourself. Clara made her choices. You can't let her drag you down with her. But if I testify, she'll go to prison. She's going to prison anyway. The question is whether you'll be in the cell next to hers. I took a sip of wine and looked around the apartment. Everything was perfect, expensive, carefully chosen, like Tessa herself. How did we get here? I asked. A year ago, Clara and I were happy. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but we were solid. Now everything is falling apart. These things happen gradually, Tessa said. Clara started changing when she met Richard. She became obsessed with status, with money, with being seen as successful. When did she first meet Richard? At a charity event. I introduced them, actually. I thought he might be a good client for her firm. You introduced them? Yes. Richard was looking for PR help, and Clara was looking for high-profile clients. It seemed like a perfect match. I set down my wine glass and looked at Tessa. Did you know they would have an affair? Tessa hesitated for just a moment. I suspected Richard might try something. He has a reputation. But I thought Clara was smart enough to keep things professional. But she wasn't. No, she got caught up in his world. The money, the power, the excitement. She lost sight of what was important. What was important? Tessa moved closer to me on the couch. You, David. You were what was important, but Clara couldn't see that. And you could. I've always seen it. You're brilliant, successful, loyal. Clara never appreciated what she had. I felt Tessa's hand on my arm and realized that Clara had been right about one thing. Tessa was in love with me. Tessa, I'm still married. Are you? Really? After everything Clara has done? The marriage is over, but I'm not ready for anything else. I understand, but when you are ready, I want you to know that I'm here for you. I looked into Tessa's eyes and saw genuine affection mixed with something else. Calculation. Ambition. The same look I had seen in Clara's eyes over the past year. Can I ask you something? Anything. The domestic abuse allegations Clara made against me. Did you advise her to do that? Tessa's expression didn't change, but I saw her body tense slightly. Clara was scared. She thought you might become violent when you found out about the affair. But I've never been violent, you know that. People can change when they're under stress. Clara was just being cautious. Cautious enough to fake evidence? Now Tessa's expression did change. The warmth disappeared, replaced by the cold calculation I was beginning to recognize. What are you implying, David? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Did you help Clara create fake evidence of domestic abuse? Tessa stood up and walked to the window. When she turned back to face me, she looked like a different person. Harder, more dangerous. You're wearing a wire, aren't you? I didn't answer, but my expression must have given me away. I thought so. Catherine Morrison is smarter than I gave her credit for. So, you admit it? Tessa laughed, and the sound was cold and bitter. Admit what? That I helped my best friend protect herself from an abusive husband? That I provided legal advice to a client in distress? Admit that you orchestrated this entire scheme. Prove it. I stood up and faced her. I don't have to prove it. The FBI will do that. Will they? Based on what evidence? The word of a woman facing federal prison time? The suspicions of a husband scorned? Tessa walked back to the couch and sat down, pouring herself another glass of wine. She looked completely calm, as if we were discussing the weather. You're very good at this, I said. I'm the best criminal defense attorney in the city. Of course I'm good at this. Is that what this is about? Building your reputation? Partly. High-profile cases are worth millions in future business. And the other part? Tessa looked at me for a long moment. The other part is about justice. Justice? You've been wasted on Clara for 8 years. Brilliant, successful, loyal, and completely unappreciated. She took you for granted, treated you like an accessory to her ambitions. So you decided to destroy our marriage? I decided to show you who Clara really was. Everything she did, every choice she made was her own decision. I just provided opportunities. I felt a chill run down my spine. You manipulated her. I advised her. There's a difference. You knew she would make the wrong choices. I knew she would make the choices that reflected her true character. And now you know too. I looked at this woman I had known for 5 years, who had been a guest in my home, who had pretended to be my friend, and I realized that she was far more dangerous than Clara had ever been. What happens now? Now you divorce Clara, who will be in federal prison for the next 5 to 10 years. You rebuild your life, probably with my help and support. And eventually, when you're ready, we see where this goes. Tessa gestured between us, and I understood that she was talking about a romantic relationship. And if I'm not interested? Then you're not interested, but I think you will be. We have a lot in common, David. We're both intelligent, ambitious, and we both understand the value of careful planning. I walked toward the door. I think I've heard enough. David. Tessa's voice stopped me. You should know that I genuinely care about you. Everything I did for us. I turned back to look at her. You destroyed my marriage, ruined my wife's life, and committed multiple felonies. If that's your idea of caring, then I want nothing to do with it. Your marriage was already over. Clara ruined her own life, and the felonies are impossible to prove. We'll see about that. I left Tessa's apartment and walked several blocks before calling Catherine Morrison. How did it go? She admitted to everything except the parts that would send her to prison. Did she incriminate herself? Not directly. She's too smart for that. Then we'll have to be smarter. I met Catherine at her office, where Agent Williams was waiting with the FBI technical team. They had been monitoring the conversation in real time, and their expressions were grim. She's good, Agent Williams said. Very careful about what she said and how she said it. Is it enough to charge her? Not yet, but it's enough to keep investigating. We spent the next hour analyzing the recording, looking for anything that could be used as evidence. Tessa had been careful, but she had also been arrogant. And arrogance, as I was learning, often led to mistakes. There's one thing, Agent Williams said. She admitted to introducing your wife to Richard Vale specifically because she thought he might try something with her. Is that a crime? If she did it with the intent to facilitate securities violations, it could be conspiracy. Can you prove intent? Maybe. If we can show a pattern of behavior, a series of actions designed to create the criminal conspiracy. Catherine leaned forward. What about the domestic abuse allegations? She clearly helped Clara create those. That's obstruction of justice, if we can prove it. Agent Williams stood up. We're going to need more evidence. Witnesses, documents, something that directly connects Tessa Lynn to the criminal activity. What about Clara? I asked. Will she cooperate? That depends on whether she wants to spend 5 years in prison or 15. I drove back to Catherine's guest house, thinking about everything that had happened over the past week. 7 days ago, I had been a successful corporate executive with a troubled marriage. Now I was the key witness in a federal conspiracy case involving securities fraud, obstruction of justice, and criminal manipulation. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I had discovered that I was capable of fighting back. My phone rang as I pulled into the driveway. Clara. David, we need to talk. It's about Tessa. What about her? She's planning something that will destroy both of us. I'll be right there. I drove to the federal building, where Clara was waiting with her new attorney. She looked even worse than she had the day before, but her eyes were clear and focused. Tessa called me an hour ago, she said. She wanted to know what I had told you about her involvement in the scheme. What did you tell her? Nothing. But David, she's scared, and scared people do desperate things. Clara's attorney, a serious man named Robert Chen, leaned forward. My client is prepared to cooperate fully with the federal investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Agent Williams nodded. What can she tell us? Everything. The entire conspiracy, from the beginning. Tessa's role, Richard's involvement, the securities violations, the cover-up. All of it. Clara spent the next 3 hours providing a detailed account of Tessa's manipulation. How Tessa had introduced her to Vale, coached her on extracting information from him, advised her on using that information for her other clients, and then helped her cover up the crimes when the investigation began. She documented everything, Clara said. Every meeting, every conversation, every transaction. She said it was for legal protection, but now I realize she was building a case file. A case file for what? For destroying Richard Vale. She's been planning to expose the entire scheme from the beginning, positioning herself as the whistleblower who brought down a corrupt billionaire. Agent Williams looked skeptical. Why would she implicate herself in the conspiracy? She wouldn't. The plan was to make it look like Richard coerced me into participating, and that she discovered the scheme while representing me. I felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. She was going to be the hero who exposed the corruption and saved the innocent victim. Exactly. And in the process, she would destroy our marriage, eliminate Richard as a competitor, and position herself as the most famous criminal defense attorney in the country. What changed? Agent Williams asked. Clara looked at me. David changed. Instead of playing the role of the devastated husband, he started fighting back. That forced Tessa to accelerate her timeline and make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The domestic abuse allegations were supposed to be a last resort, something to use if David became too difficult to control. But she pushed them too early, before she had solid evidence. Robert Chen pulled out a folder. We have copies of text messages between Tessa and my client, discussing the creation of fake evidence and the timing of the allegations. Agent Williams took the folder and studied the contents. This is good. Very good. There's more, Clara said. Tessa has been recording our conversations for months. She has hours of audio that could be edited to make it sound like I was the mastermind and she was just following my instructions. Where are these recordings? In her office safe, along with copies of all the documents related to the securities violations. Agent Williams stood up. We need to get a search warrant for Tessa Lynn's office immediately. As the FBI agents prepared to raid Tessa's law firm, I found myself alone with Clara for the first time since this all began. Why are you helping me? She asked. I'm not helping you. I'm helping the truth come out. Is there a difference? I thought about it. Maybe not. Clara was quiet for a moment. I know I can't undo what I did. The affair, the crimes, the lies. But I want you to know that I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? I don't know. I just wanted to be successful, important, respected. At what cost? I didn't think about the cost. That was the problem. I looked at the woman I had once loved, who was now facing years in federal prison, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Forgiveness. Not for what she had done to our marriage. That was unforgivable. But for the weakness and ambition that had led her to make such destructive choices. What happens now? She asked. Now you serve your time and try to rebuild your life. And us? There is no us, Clara. There hasn't been for a long time. She nodded, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. I'm sorry, David. For all of it. I know. Agent Williams returned with news that the search warrant had been approved. Within hours, FBI agents would be searching Tessa's office and seizing evidence of the conspiracy. What about Tessa herself? I asked. We're preparing an arrest warrant. She'll be in custody by tomorrow morning. I felt a sense of satisfaction that surprised me with its intensity. For the first time in months, justice was being served. My phone rang. Tessa. David, we need to meet. There's been a development. I looked at Agent Williams, who nodded. Where? My office, 1 hour. I'll be there. Agent Williams handed me a new recording device. This is it, David. Get her to admit her involvement in the conspiracy. What if she doesn't? Then we'll have to build the case without her confession, but it would be much stronger with it. I drove to Tessa's law firm, a gleaming tower in Midtown Manhattan. The lobby was all marble and glass, designed to impress clients and intimidate opponents. I wondered how many other people Tessa had manipulated in this building. Her office was on the 40th floor, with panoramic views of the city. Tessa was standing at the window when I arrived, looking out at the lights below. Beautiful, isn't it? She said without turning around. What's the development you wanted to discuss? She turned to face me, and I was surprised to see that she looked completely calm, almost serene. Clara is cooperating with the FBI. How do you know that? I have sources everywhere, David. It's part of being a good attorney. So what happens now? Tessa walked to her desk and sat down. Now we discuss terms. What kind of terms? Clara is going to tell the FBI that I masterminded the entire conspiracy, that I manipulated her into having an affair with Richard Vale, coached her on extracting inside information, and helped her use that information to manipulate stock prices. Did you? Of course I did, but that's not the point. I stared at her. You're admitting it? I'm admitting it to you. There's a difference. Tessa opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small device. Electronic signal jammer, very effective against recording devices. I felt the FBI wire against my chest and realized that it was useless now. The point, Tessa continued, is that Clara's testimony alone won't be enough to convict me. She's a criminal facing serious prison time. Her credibility is compromised. What about the evidence? What evidence? Text messages that could be interpreted multiple ways, advice given to a client in distress, introductions made at social events? I realized that Tessa was right. Without a clear confession or documentary evidence, the case against her would be difficult to prove. So what do you want from me? I want you to refuse to cooperate with the FBI investigation. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'll destroy you. The calm mask slipped, and for the first time, I saw the real Tessa Lynn. Cold, calculating, and utterly ruthless. How? I have recordings of every conversation you and I have ever had. Conversations where you expressed anger toward Clara, frustration with your marriage, and interest in seeing her punished. So, edited properly, those recordings could make it sound like you were the one who orchestrated this entire scheme, the jealous husband who manipulated his wife's lawyer into destroying her life. I felt a chill run down my spine. No one would believe that. Wouldn't they? You had motive, opportunity, and means. You knew about Clara's vulnerabilities, her ambitions, her weaknesses. You could have easily manipulated her into making self-destructive choices. But I didn't. Can you prove that? I realized that I was trapped. Tessa had been planning this for months, maybe years. Every conversation, every interaction, every piece of advice had been calculated to serve her ultimate goal. What do you really want, Tessa? She leaned back in her chair and smiled. I want what I've always wanted. You. That's not going to happen. Isn't it? Clara will be in prison. Richard Vale will be disgraced and probably bankrupt. You'll need someone to help you rebuild your life. Not you. Who else? Who else understands what you've been through? Who else has the skills to protect you from the consequences of this investigation? I looked around her office, at the expensive furniture and the prestigious law degrees on the wall, and I realized that everything was a facade. Tessa Lynn was a predator, and I had been her target from the beginning. You're insane. I'm practical. I saw what I wanted, and I took steps to get it. That's not insane. That's strategic. It's criminal. Only if you can prove it. And you can't. I stood up to leave. We'll see about that. David. Her voice stopped me at the door. You should know that I genuinely love you. Everything I did because I believe we belong together. I turned back to look at her one last time. If that's your idea of love, then I feel sorry for you. Don't feel sorry for me. Feel sorry for yourself. Because this isn't over. I left Tessa's office and took the elevator down to the lobby, my mind racing with possibilities. She was right about one thing. Proving her involvement in the conspiracy would be difficult without clear evidence. But she had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated me. I walked several blocks before calling Agent Williams. How did it go? She admitted everything, but the signal was jammed. We don't have a recording. Damn. What did she say? I recounted the conversation, including Tessa's threats and her claim to have recordings that could implicate me. She's bluffing, Agent Williams said. She's trying to scare you into backing down. Maybe, but what if she's not? Then we'll deal with it. David, you're not the criminal here. Don't let her convince you otherwise. I met Agent Williams at the FBI field office. where the search of Tessa's law firm was already underway. Agents were seizing computers, files, and the contents of her office safe. Find anything interesting? Oh yes, Ms. Lynn is a very thorough record keeper. Agent Williams led me to a conference room where evidence from the search was being catalogued. Boxes of documents, computer hard drives, and recording equipment filled several tables. She recorded everything, Agent Williams said. Every phone call, every meeting, every conversation, hundreds of hours of audio. Including conversations with me? Probably. But David, that works in our favor. If she recorded her conversations with you, she also recorded her conversations with Clara and Richard Vale. I felt a spark of hope. Conversations where she might have incriminated herself? Exactly. She was so focused on gathering evidence against everyone else, she forgot that she was creating evidence against herself. We spent the next several hours listening to selected recordings, Tessa's voice, coaching Clara on how to extract information from Vale, Tessa's voice, advising Clara on which stocks to recommend based on inside information, Tessa's voice, helping Clara plan the cover-up when the investigation began. This is incredible, Agent Williams said. She documented her own conspiracy. Why would she keep all this? Insurance. She wanted leverage over everyone involved, but she got too clever for her own good. As the sun rose over Manhattan, FBI agents arrested Tessa Lynn at her apartment. I wasn't there to see it, but Agent Williams called me with the news. She's in custody. Charges include conspiracy, securities fraud, obstruction of justice, and witness intimidation. What about Clara? She'll plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for her cooperation, probably 18 months in minimum security. And Richard Vale? 5 to 10 years. His cooperation won't help him much. He was the primary beneficiary of the scheme. I hung up the phone and sat in Catherine Morrison's guest house, trying to process everything that had happened. A week ago, my biggest problem was a troubled marriage. Now I was the key witness in one of the biggest white-collar crime cases of the year. But more importantly, I had learned something about myself. When pushed to the edge, when everything I cared about was threatened, I was capable of fighting back. I was capable of winning. My phone rang one last time. Clara, calling from the Federal Detention Center. David, I heard about Tessa's arrest. Yes. I wanted to thank you. For everything. For fighting for the truth. I wasn't fighting for you, Clara. I know. But you were fighting